The wind carries secrets across vast expanses of time, whispering stories that predate the written word by tens of thousands of years. Listen closely, and you might hear the splash of water against makeshift vessels, the crackle of fires built on distant shores, the footsteps of our ancestors as they stood at the edge of everything they knew and chose to venture into the unknown. Picture, if you will, a coastline that no longer exists, where the sea level rests nearly 400 feet lower than it does today, revealing land bridges and island chains that have since vanished beneath the waves. The air tastes different here, thick with salt and possibility, while massive ice sheets stretch across continents that seem both familiar and utterly alien. In this world of endless twilight and perpetual dawn, small bands of early humans gather driftwood and vines, their weathered hands crafting the first vessels that would carry our species across impossible distances. They had no maps, no compasses, no understanding of currents or tides, yet somehow they managed to cross stretches of open ocean that challenge even modern sailors. They carried fire in hollow gourds, tools wrapped in animal skins, and something far more precious than any material possession, an unshakable belief that somewhere beyond the horizon lay new possibilities for survival, for growth, for the continuation of their ancient lineage. Before we begin this journey into the depths of human prehistory, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments where in the world you are listening from, and at what time of day. Are you drifting off to sleep in a modern city, or perhaps watching the sunrise from a place your ancestors might have once called home? Stand here with me at the precipice of understanding, where the familiar world ends and mystery begins, on a shoreline that exists now only in the archaeological record and in the deepest memories encoded within our genes. The year is approximately 65,000 before our present moment, though time moves differently here, measured not in calendar pages but in the slow retreat of glaciers and the patient accumulation of shells and bones in coastal middens. The ocean before you bears little resemblance to the waters you might know from modern satellite images or vacation photographs. This is a sea transformed by ice. Its level dropped so dramatically that entire continents of land lie exposed between what are now distant islands, creating a maze of coastlines and shallow channels that seem to beckon toward horizons thick with promise and uncertainty. The very geography of possibility has been rewritten by the cosmic dance of ice ages, revealing pathways that will vanish again when the great thaw comes, leaving only the faintest traces for future archaeologists to puzzle over in their sterile laboratories. The people who gather here move with the fluid grace of those who have lived their entire lives in harmony with natural rhythms, their bodies lean and strong from constant travel, their eyes holding depths that speak of generations spent reading signs in cloud formations and bird migrations. They are not primitive in any sense that modern minds might understand, but rather supremely adapted to a world that demands constant innovation, perpetual problem-solving, and an intimate knowledge of materials and techniques that university courses could never adequately convey. Watch as weathered hands select pieces of driftwood with the discerning eye of a master craftsman, feeling for density and grain, testing flexibility with gentle pressure that reveals secrets hidden within the cellular structure. These are the same hands that knap stone tools with precision that would impress modern archaeologists, that kindle fire in conditions that would challenge survival experts, that weave plant fibers into cordage strong enough to bind together the components of vessels capable of carrying precious human cargo across stretches of open water. The children of these coastal dwellers grow up with salt spray in their hair and sand between their toes, learning before they can properly walk to read the subtle signs that distinguish safe landing areas from treacherous currents, to recognize the cloud formations that indicate land beyond the visible horizon, to understand the complex relationships between wind patterns and seasonal migrations of fish and seabirds. Their education takes place not in classrooms but in the lived experience of daily survival, where mistakes carry consequences measured not in failed grades, but in the stark mathematics of life and death. Yet there is something more than mere survival driving these early maritime pioneers, something that speaks to the deepest currents of human nature. Perhaps it is curiosity, that same restless questioning that would eventually lead their descendants to split atoms and explore the cosmos. Perhaps it is hope, the enduring belief that somewhere beyond the known world lies a place of greater abundance, safer shelter, new possibilities for their children and their children's children. Or perhaps it is simply the inevitable expression of a species whose greatest strength has always been the willingness to venture into the unknown armed with nothing more than ingenuity and determination. The vessels they construct would barely qualify as boats by modern standards, more accurately described as rafts or flotation platforms, lashed together with plant fibers and sealed with natural resins that bubble and harden under the patient application of controlled heat. Yet these humble craft represent one of the most significant technological leaps in human history, the moment when our species truly began to master not just the land and its resources, but the vast liquid highways that connect continents and carry the promise of endless exploration. As evening approaches and cooking fires begin to dot the shoreline like fallen stars, the elders gather the younger members of the tribe to share knowledge that cannot be written down, cannot be preserved in any form except the careful repetition of words and the patient demonstration of techniques. They speak of currents that run like invisible rivers through the ocean, of seasonal patterns in weather and wildlife, of the subtle art of reading watercolor and wave patterns to determine depth and proximity to land. This is a university of the natural world where graduation is measured by safe return from increasingly ambitious voyages, where the curriculum is written in the language of survival and the promise of discovery. The stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky, the same constellations that will guide these early navigators across impossible distances, their patterns memorized with the same dedication that modern students might apply to mathematical formulas or historical dates. But these stars are more than academic subjects. They are companions on lonely nights far from shore, reliable friends whose positions tell stories of direction and season, distance traveled and distance yet to go. Tomorrow, or perhaps the day after, when conditions align in ways that only generations of accumulated wisdom can properly interpret, some of these coastal dwellers will push their craft into the surf and disappear beyond the horizon, carrying with them the hopes and fears of an entire community, the accumulated knowledge of countless previous voyages, and the unshakable human conviction that the world is larger and more welcoming than the boundaries of current understanding might suggest. In the half-light before dawn, when the boundary between sea and sky dissolves into layers of grey uncertainty, skilled hands begin the ancient work of transformation, turning raw materials into vessels of possibility. These are not the soft hands of modern civilization, but rather tools themselves, hardened by constant use, scarred by the sharp edges of stone and shell, yet capable of delicate manipulation that would impress the most skilled artisans of any era. The selection of materials begins long before construction with careful observation of how different woods behave in water, which fibers hold their strength when wet, what natural adhesives maintain their binding properties under the constant stress of wave action. Bamboo, where it grows in the warmer coastal regions, offers a nearly perfect combination of strength and flexibility, its hollow chambers providing natural buoyancy while its fibrous structure resists breaking under pressure. But in cooler climates, driftwood becomes the primary building material, each piece evaluated for its potential contribution to a vessel that must balance stability with maneuverability, cargo capacity with structural integrity. Watch closely as these early engineers solve problems that would challenge modern boat builders, using only materials provided by nature and techniques developed through generations of trial and error. The joining of wooden elements requires not metal fasteners but rather ingenious combinations of lashing and fitting, where mortise and tenon joints are carved with stone tools sharp enough to achieve surprising precision. Plant fibers are not simply tied in random knots but woven into complex binding patterns that distribute stress evenly across critical connection points, preventing the catastrophic failures that could doom an entire expedition. The waterproofing of these primitive vessels represents perhaps the most crucial technological innovation, requiring deep knowledge of natural materials and their properties under various conditions. Tree resins, carefully heated and mixed with animal fats, create sealants that remain flexible in cold water while maintaining their waterproof characteristics. The application of these materials requires patience and skill, building up layers that penetrate deep into the wood grain while creating surface barriers that can withstand the constant assault of spray and submersion. But construction techniques represent only part of the story. Equally important is the development of specialized tools designed specifically for maritime use. Stone adzes, their cutting edges ground to precise angles, shape wooden components with efficiency that seems almost impossible given their primitive appearance. Bone needles and awls pierce tough materials to create the holes necessary for complex lashing patterns. Shell scrapers smooth rough surfaces and remove excess material with the precision of modern sandpaper. The most remarkable aspect of this early maritime technology lies not in any individual innovation but rather in the sophisticated understanding of systems thinking that underlies every design decision. These builders recognize that a vessel is more than the sum of its parts, that every component must work in harmony with every other component to create something capable of supporting human life in one of Earth's most challenging environments. Weight distribution, center of gravity, response to wave action, storage of essential supplies, all these factors must be considered simultaneously, balanced against each other in ways that demonstrate a profound understanding of physical principles that would not be formalized by Western science for tens of thousands of years. The tools themselves tell stories of innovation and adaptation, their forms evolving in response to specific challenges encountered during construction and use. A particular type of cutting edge proves more effective for working with wet wood. The design spreads through the community, passed along not through technical manuals but through careful observation and imitation. A new technique for creating watertight joints emerges when someone discovers an improved method of fitting components together. Within a generation, this knowledge becomes standard practice, incorporated into the growing body of maritime wisdom. Yet perhaps most impressive is the way these early boat builders approach the fundamental challenge of creating something that does not exist in nature. While they can observe how logs float and study the swimming motions of animals, the concept of a constructed vessel capable of carrying multiple passengers and cargo across substantial distances represents a conceptual leap that requires both imagination and technical skill. They must envision not just what their creation will look like when completed, but how it will behave in various conditions, how it will respond to loading and weather, how it can be modified and improved based on performance in actual use. The social aspects of construction prove equally important, as these projects require collaboration and coordination among multiple individuals with different skills and areas of expertise. The procurement of materials involves not just gathering but also understanding seasonal variations in quality and availability. Some individuals specialize in the preparation of cordage, developing techniques for processing plant fibers that maximize strength while maintaining workability. Others focus on the creation and application of sealants, becoming experts in the subtle art of achieving watertight integrity without adding excessive weight. Knowledge transfer happens through apprenticeship relationships that span generations, where young people learn not just techniques but also the underlying principles that guide decision-making in novel situations. They discover how to evaluate materials under different conditions, how to adapt standard procedures when ideal components are not available, how to innovate solutions to problems that have never been encountered before. This educational process creates not just skilled craftspeople but creative problem solvers capable of pushing the boundaries of what is possible with limited resources. As these early vessels take shape under patient hands, they represent far more than transportation devices. They embody the accumulated wisdom of entire communities, the hopes and dreams of people willing to risk everything for the chance of discovery, the technical foundation that will eventually enable human expansion across the entire planet. Each binding tells a story of innovation, each joint represents a problem solved, each sealed seam carries the promise that somewhere beyond the horizon lies a new chapter in the long story of human exploration and adaptation. In the inventory of essentials that early ocean travelers must carry with them, nothing proves more critical than fire, not the fire itself, which cannot survive the journey, but rather the carefully preserved embers and tinder that can be coaxed back to life once safe harbor is reached. This presents one of the most challenging technical problems faced by early maritime pioneers: how to preserve the fundamental tool of human civilization while crossing an environment that seems utterly hostile to its survival. The solution requires not just technical innovation but also a deep understanding of fire as a living entity with its own needs and vulnerabilities, something that must be nurtured and protected with the same care given to a sick child or injured companion. The vessels that carry human cargo across impossible distances must also serve as mobile hearths. equipped with specially designed firekeeping systems that can maintain the essential spark of civilization even in conditions that would defeat less carefully planned efforts. Picture the careful preparation that precedes every ocean crossing, as specialized firekeepers select the finest tinder materials and prepare them through processes passed down across generations of maritime experience. Certain fungi, when properly dried and treated with natural accelerants, can smolder for days without visible flame, their internal combustion requiring only minimal oxygen while producing enough heat to ignite fresh tinder when conditions permit. These precious materials are wrapped in layers of protective covering, sealed within containers made from hollow gourds or animal stomachs, creating portable fire preservation systems that represent some of the most sophisticated technology of their era. The psychology of firekeeping during ocean crossings reveals profound insights into the mental state of early navigators, for whom the successful preservation of embers represents not just practical necessity, but also spiritual connection to the homeland left behind. The glowing coals carry more than potential heat, they embody the continuity of human culture, the unbroken chain of flame that stretches back to the first controlled fires and forward to every future hearth that will warm human hands. The responsibility of maintaining this connection weighs heavily on designated firekeepers, whose success or failure can determine the survival of entire expeditions. The technical challenges of fire preservation at sea go far beyond simply keeping materials dry, though protection from salt spray and rain represents a constant concern that requires innovative solutions. Temperature fluctuations, limited oxygen supply, and the constant motion of small vessels all conspire to extinguish even the most carefully tended embers. The containers themselves must be designed to allow just enough air circulation to maintain combustion without permitting the entry of moisture or the escape of precious heat. Too little oxygen and the fire dies. Too much and it burns too quickly, consuming irreplaceable fuel before the journey's end. The selection of fuel materials requires encyclopedic knowledge of plant properties and burning characteristics, understanding which species produce long-lasting coals, which create the hottest initial flames, which can be relied upon to ignite even when partially damp. Different stages of the journey may require different types of fuel: quick-burning materials for cooking meals during favorable weather, slow-burning substances for maintaining overnight embers, easily ignited tinder for emergency fire starting when conditions become desperate. Each type must be gathered, processed, and stored according to specific requirements that leave no room for error or oversight. The social dynamics of firekeeping during ocean crossings reveal fascinating insights into early human cooperation and specialization, as communities develop elaborate protocols for ensuring that this critical responsibility is shared appropriately among expedition members. Some individuals demonstrate particular aptitude for reading the subtle signs that indicate when embers need attention, when fuel supplies are running low, when weather conditions require additional protective measures. These fire specialists become essential members of any ocean crossing expedition, their skills as valued as navigation knowledge or boat-building expertise. The rituals surrounding fire preservation often take on spiritual dimensions that reflect the profound importance of maintaining this connection to human civilization, with ceremonial aspects that serve both practical and psychological functions. The daily tending of embers becomes a meditation on continuity and survival, a reminder that the small band of travelers carries with them not just their own hopes but the accumulated achievements of countless previous generations. The successful preservation of fire throughout a dangerous crossing represents victory not just over physical challenges but over the fundamental threat of regression to a pre-technological state. Weather conditions during ocean crossings present the most severe tests of fire preservation systems, when violent storms threaten to penetrate even the most carefully designed protective containers. The firekeepers must develop techniques for maintaining combustion even when their vessels are taking on water, when salt spray penetrates every supposedly waterproof seal, when the very air seems saturated with moisture that seeks to extinguish any source of heat. These extreme conditions demand not just technical skill but also psychological resilience, the ability to remain calm and focused when failure could doom the entire expedition. The moment of successful firelighting upon reaching a new shore represents one of the most emotionally charged experiences in early human exploration, validation that the long journey has preserved not just human life but human capability. The first flames rising from carefully tended embers symbolize the successful establishment of human presence in a new land, the moment when unknown territory begins its transformation into homeland. This fire, kindled from embers that began their journey on distant shores, creates an unbroken connection between old and new, past and future, the world left behind and the world about to be born. The technology of fire preservation during ocean crossings eventually evolves into increasingly sophisticated systems, with specialized containers designed for different stages of the journey, backup preservation methods that provide redundancy against catastrophic failure, and standardized procedures that ensure consistent results even under the most challenging conditions. Yet throughout this technological evolution, the fundamental challenge remains unchanged: how to carry the essence of human civilization across vast expanses of hostile environment, preserving not just the physical flame, but the cultural knowledge and spiritual significance that make humans more than mere survivors in an indifferent world. Long before the invention of compass or sextant, long before the development of mathematical navigation or written sailing instructions, early ocean travelers learned to read the sea itself as a vast library of information, where every wave pattern and current shift contained essential knowledge for those skilled enough to interpret the subtle messages written in water and wind. This natural navigation system required not instruments but rather the development of senses heightened to extraordinary sensitivity, minds trained to recognize patterns invisible to casual observation, and memory systems capable of preserving complex navigational knowledge across generations of oral transmission. The ocean reveals its secrets gradually to those patient enough to observe and wise enough to understand the relationships between seemingly unrelated phenomena, where the behavior of seabirds indicates the proximity of land, where the color and clarity of water speaks of depth and current patterns, where the sound and rhythm of waves against a vessel's hull tells stories of weather systems and underwater topography. These early navigators develop an almost mystical ability to sense direction and location through environmental cues that modern sailors dependent on electronic instruments might never notice or understand. Watch as an experienced navigator tastes seawater to determine salinity levels that indicate proximity to river mouths and freshwater sources, or studies the patterns of floating debris to understand the direction and strength of surface currents. The temperature of the water itself becomes a navigation tool, with different current systems carrying distinct thermal signatures that can be detected through direct contact. Even the phosphorescence that sometimes illuminates night waters provides navigation information, as different types of marine organisms create distinctive patterns of bioluminescence that vary according to location and season. The wind becomes a constant companion and teacher, its direction, strength, and subtle variations in temperature and humidity providing a continuous stream of navigational data for those trained to interpret its messages. Experienced navigators learn to identify the characteristic feel of winds that have traveled over different types of terrain, distinguishing between air masses that have crossed vast expanses of open ocean and those that have recently passed over large land masses. The scent carried on these winds tells its own stories. The green smell of growing vegetation indicates nearby islands, while the mineral odors of exposed rock suggest different types of coastlines and geological formations. Cloud formations high overhead serve as a celestial navigation system, with different types of clouds indicating various atmospheric conditions that correlate with geographic features and weather patterns. The way clouds form and dissipate over invisible islands beyond the horizon provides early warning of land long before visual contact becomes possible. Experienced navigators learn to read the subtle differences between clouds that form over water and those that develop over land, using these atmospheric signatures to maintain course toward distant objectives even when direct visual confirmation remains impossible. The behavior of marine life creates another layer of navigational information. as different species follow predictable migration patterns and feeding behaviors that correlate with seasonal changes and geographic locations. Schools of fish moving in particular directions often indicate current patterns and the presence of underwater features that influence water flow. Seabirds, with their superior eyesight and knowledge of feeding areas, become unwitting guides for human navigators, skilled enough to interpret their flight patterns and understand their relationship to land-based roosting sites. The stars, of course, provide the most reliable navigation reference, but early ocean travelers developed techniques for stellar navigation that go far beyond simple direction finding, learning to use the rising and setting positions of specific stars to determine latitude, to recognize seasonal variations in stellar positions that indicate the passage of time during long voyages, to navigate by star patterns even when clouds obscure portions of the night sky. This celestial knowledge becomes encoded in elaborate memory systems, often involving songs and stories that preserve precise astronomical information in forms that can be accurately transmitted across generations. Wave patterns represent perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of natural navigation, as experienced navigators learn to distinguish between waves generated by local weather conditions and the deeper swells that originate from distant storm systems and distant shores. The interaction between different wave systems creates complex interference patterns that can indicate the direction and distance to land masses that remain invisible beyond the horizon. The way waves bend and refract around underwater obstacles provides information about bottom topography and the presence of reefs, shoals, and safe passages through dangerous waters. The development of these natural navigation skills requires not just individual talent, but also cultural systems for preserving and transmitting knowledge across generations, with elaborate apprenticeship programs that begin in childhood and continue throughout a navigator's lifetime. Young people learn not just specific techniques but also the underlying principles that govern natural phenomena, developing the pattern recognition skills and intuitive understanding that enable them to adapt standard procedures to novel situations and changing conditions. The psychological aspects of natural navigation prove equally important, as navigators must develop the confidence to trust their senses and interpretation of natural signs even when making decisions that could determine the survival of entire expeditions. This requires not just technical skill but also deep faith in traditional knowledge systems and the accumulated wisdom of previous navigators. The ability to remain calm and focused when conventional landmarks disappear becomes as important as any technical competency, since navigation errors under stress can compound quickly into life-threatening situations. The social dimensions of navigation knowledge create complex relationships within maritime communities, where master navigators hold positions of tremendous respect and responsibility, their skills literally determining the survival chances of anyone who ventures onto the ocean. The transfer of this knowledge involves not just instruction, but also initiation into a specialized fraternity of individuals who carry the accumulated wisdom of countless previous voyages. The death of an experienced navigator without proper knowledge transfer represents a catastrophic loss for the entire community, potentially closing off entire regions of ocean that had previously been accessible. Weather prediction becomes an essential component of natural navigation, as early ocean travelers learn to recognize the subtle signs that indicate approaching storm systems, seasonal changes in wind patterns, and optimal timing for various types of voyages. This meteorological knowledge develops through careful observation of natural phenomena combined with accumulated experience of how weather patterns affect ocean conditions and navigation challenges. The ability to predict weather changes several days in advance often determines the difference between successful voyages and tragic failures, making weather interpretation skills as valuable as any other aspect of navigation expertise. During the height of the last ice age, when massive glaciers lock away enough of Earth's water to drop ocean levels by nearly 400 feet, an entirely different world emerges from beneath the waves, a world of exposed land bridges and island chains that create stepping stones across what are now vast expanses of open ocean. This transformed geography reveals migration routes that seem almost designed for human expansion, natural pathways that will vanish forever when the great ice sheets begin their inevitable retreat toward the poles. Picture the Indonesian archipelago of 65,000 years ago, where the shallow seas between major islands drain away to reveal broad coastal plains and narrow water channels that can be crossed with relatively primitive watercraft. The distance between visible shores shrinks from hundreds of miles to tens of miles, bringing the horizon within reach of even the most basic navigation techniques. Islands that today stand isolated in deep water become connected by chains of smaller islands and exposed reefs, creating natural highway systems that seem to beckon toward exploration and settlement. The Sahul Shelf, that vast expanse of shallow water that today separates Australia from New Guinea and the Indonesian islands, emerges during this period as a continuous landmass larger than modern Australia itself, supporting vast ecosystems of giant marsupials and providing unlimited opportunities for human expansion. Yet even with these dramatic changes in sea level, significant water barriers remain, including the deep channels that separate this combined continent from the Southeast Asian mainland. These permanent water obstacles represent the true test of early human maritime technology, requiring ocean crossings of 30 to 50 miles across waters that have never been shallow enough for land bridges. The timing of human arrivals in various island regions provides fascinating insights into the development of maritime technology and navigation skills, as archaeological evidence reveals a clear progression from shorter to longer ocean crossings that mirrors the gradual improvement of boat-building techniques and navigational knowledge. The earliest evidence of human presence on islands requiring water crossings dates to approximately 65,000 years ago, suggesting that even relatively primitive watercraft were capable of impressive ocean voyages when conditions were optimal and navigation skills were sufficiently developed. The exposed geography of the Ice Age reveals natural staging areas where early ocean travelers could establish temporary settlements, build and repair watercraft, and prepare for the next stage of their island-hopping journeys. These way stations become crucial elements in long-distance migration routes, providing safe harbors where expeditions can wait for favorable weather conditions and resupply with fresh water and provisions before attempting longer crossings to more distant islands. The strategic importance of these locations creates the first maritime trade networks, as successful navigation routes become established pathways for regular communication and resource exchange. The ecological consequences of lower sea levels create entirely different island environments from those familiar to modern researchers, with many current islands connected to form larger landmasses supporting diverse ecosystems and substantial human populations. The separation of these populations when rising sea levels eventually isolate them on smaller islands leads to fascinating examples of independent cultural and technological development, as different groups adapt to their new circumstances in ways that reflect both shared ancestry and local innovation. The archaeological record of these Ice Age islands presents unique challenges for modern researchers, as the most important coastal settlements lie buried beneath hundreds of feet of water on what are now submerged continental shelves. The evidence that does survive, on highlands that remained above water throughout the subsequent sea level rise, provides only fragmentary glimpses of sophisticated maritime cultures that once flourished in environments that no longer exist. These tantalizing archaeological traces suggest complex societies with advanced boat-building technologies, extensive trade networks, and navigation skills that enabled regular travel across substantial ocean distances. The plant and animal resources available on Ice Age islands often differ dramatically from modern island ecosystems, with many species driven to extinction by sea level rise and the resulting habitat loss. Some of these resources may have been crucial for early maritime development, providing materials for boat construction, navigation aids, or preservation of fire and food during ocean crossings. The loss of these species creates gaps in our understanding of how early ocean travelers solved various technical challenges, forcing researchers to speculate based on fragmentary evidence and analogies with modern traditional maritime cultures. The social dynamics of island colonization during the Ice Age reveal fascinating patterns of human expansion and adaptation, as small founding populations establish new settlements that must become self-sufficient while maintaining cultural connections to their places of origin. The genetic isolation that results from island life creates natural experiments in human adaptation, with some populations developing distinctive physical characteristics that reflect their unique evolutionary history. Yet despite this isolation, evidence suggests that regular contact between island populations continued throughout the Ice Age, creating networks of cultural and genetic exchange that span thousands of miles of ocean. The development of island-specific maritime technologies reflects the unique challenges and opportunities presented by different environments, as boat builders adapt their techniques to local materials and conditions while navigators develop specialized knowledge of regional weather patterns and current systems. These local innovations often prove crucial for maintaining contact with other islands, as standardized technologies may not perform adequately under the specific conditions encountered in different parts of the ocean. The diversity of solutions developed by different island populations creates a rich library of maritime knowledge that contributes to the overall advancement of human ocean crossing capabilities. The psychological impact of living on Ice Age islands, surrounded by vast expanses of water that must be crossed to reach other human settlements, creates unique cultural perspectives that influence everything from religious beliefs to artistic expression. The ocean becomes not just a highway for travel, but also a fundamental part of cultural identity, shaping worldviews that see water as a connecting rather than separating force. These maritime cultures develop sophisticated understanding of ocean phenomena that goes far beyond navigation techniques, incorporating detailed knowledge of marine ecosystems, weather patterns, and seasonal variations into complex belief systems that guide both practical decision-making and spiritual practice. The climate conditions of the Ice Age create both opportunities and challenges for island-dwelling populations, with generally cooler temperatures and different rainfall patterns affecting the availability of fresh water and agricultural resources. The adaptation to these conditions requires technological innovations in water collection and storage, food preservation and cultivation techniques, and shelter construction methods that can withstand different types of weather extremes. These adaptations become part of the cultural knowledge that enables successful island colonization and supports the maintenance of viable populations in isolation. In the warm, humid regions of Southeast Asia, where monsoon rains nurture vast forests of giant bamboo, early human migrants discover a construction material so perfectly suited to maritime applications that it seems designed by nature specifically for ocean crossing. The hollow chambers provide natural buoyancy, the flexible structure resists breaking under wave stress, and the rapid growth rate ensures renewable supplies for communities that depend on watercraft for survival and expansion. These bamboo forests become the shipyards of prehistory, where generations of skilled craftsmen develop techniques for creating vessels capable of carrying human civilization across impossible distances. The properties of bamboo that make it ideal for watercraft construction go far beyond simple buoyancy, encompassing a complex combination of strength, flexibility, and workability that no other natural material can match. The hollow structure creates chambers that trap air even when the outer walls are compromised, providing redundant flotation that can keep vessels afloat even after suffering damage that would sink solid wooden craft. The segmented construction, with natural joints that divide the hollow interior into separate compartments, prevents catastrophic failure by limiting the spread of damage from any single breach. Watch skilled bamboo workers select specific species and growth stages for different applications, recognizing that young bamboo provides maximum flexibility while mature stalks offer superior strength and durability. The timing of harvest becomes crucial, as bamboo cut during certain seasons possesses different moisture content and structural properties that affect its performance in marine applications. These specialists develop elaborate classification systems for different types of bamboo, understanding which varieties work best for structural frameworks, which provide optimal waterproofing characteristics, and which offer the best combination of weight and strength for long-distance voyages. The construction techniques developed for bamboo watercraft represent some of the most sophisticated traditional technology ever created, involving complex lashing patterns that distribute stress evenly across multiple structural elements, while allowing for the natural flexibility that prevents catastrophic failure in heavy seas. The binding materials themselves require specialized knowledge, as different plant fibers provide varying degrees of strength, water resistance, and elasticity under marine conditions. Master craftsmen develop personal techniques for treating these binding materials, using combinations of natural oils and plant extracts that enhance durability, while maintaining the flexibility necessary for effective lashing systems. The social organization around bamboo watercraft construction creates specialized communities where knowledge transfer happens through extended apprenticeships that may last for decades, as young people learn not just construction techniques but also the subtle art of reading materials and adapting standard procedures to local conditions and specific voyage requirements. These communities develop their own dialects of technical terminology, with precise words for different types of bamboo joints, various lashing techniques, and specific structural configurations that have proven successful under particular conditions. The design evolution of bamboo vessels reflects thousands of years of gradual improvement and adaptation, as each generation of builders adds refinements based on their experience with previous designs and their understanding of local conditions and voyage requirements. Some designs emphasize speed and maneuverability for short-distance travel and fishing, while others prioritize cargo capacity and stability for long-distance migration voyages. The most sophisticated designs incorporate multiple hull configurations that provide exceptional stability while maintaining the flexibility necessary for survival in heavy weather conditions. The preparation of bamboo for marine use involves elaborate processing techniques that transform raw forest materials into components capable of supporting human life in one of Earth's most challenging environments. The curing process may take months, with careful attention to moisture content, natural oils and structural integrity that must be evaluated at each stage of preparation. Some techniques involve controlled exposure to salt water that pre-adapts the bamboo to marine conditions, while others use smoke treatment that provides both preservation and water resistance. The integration of bamboo construction with other traditional technologies creates hybrid vessels that combine the best characteristics of multiple material systems, with bamboo frameworks supporting hulls made from other materials, or bamboo flotation chambers supplementing solid wooden construction. These composite designs often prove superior to single material approaches, providing redundant structural systems that can survive damage that would doom simpler constructions. The development of these hybrid technologies requires master craftsmen who understand not just bamboo working, but also the properties and techniques associated with multiple construction materials. The loading and provisioning of bamboo vessels requires specialized knowledge of weight distribution and cargo securing techniques that take advantage of the flexible structure while preventing damage from shifting loads. The hollow bamboo chambers can be used for storage of certain types of provisions, creating integrated cargo systems that maximize the efficient use of available space while maintaining structural integrity. The techniques for accessing these storage chambers during voyages without compromising the vessel's watertight integrity represent sophisticated solutions to complex engineering challenges. The repair and maintenance of bamboo vessels during long voyages requires portable toolkits and replacement materials that must be selected and prepared before departure, as damage to bamboo structures often requires immediate attention to prevent catastrophic failure. The techniques for emergency repair at sea involve specialized knots and lashing patterns that can be executed under difficult conditions using limited materials. These emergency procedures become part of the essential knowledge that every crew member must master, as the survival of entire expeditions may depend on quick and effective response to structural damage. The cultural significance of bamboo in maritime societies extends far beyond its practical applications, becoming deeply embedded in spiritual beliefs and artistic expression that reflect the close relationship between human communities and the natural resources that enable their survival. Bamboo groves become sacred spaces where the spirits of successful voyagers are believed to reside, while the construction of new vessels involves elaborate ceremonies that invoke protection and favorable conditions for upcoming journeys. The distinctive sound of wind through bamboo forests becomes associated with successful voyages and safe returns, creating cultural connections that persist long after communities have moved far from their original bamboo-rich homelands. The seasonal cycles of bamboo growth and harvesting create natural rhythms that influence the timing of major voyages and migration movements, as communities coordinate their travel plans with the availability of optimal construction materials. The planning for major expeditions may begin years in advance, with the cultivation and preparation of specific bamboo varieties that will be needed for vessel construction. This long-term planning requires sophisticated understanding of both bamboo biology and voyage logistics, creating complex scheduling systems that coordinate material preparation with seasonal weather patterns and navigation conditions. The vast emptiness of open ocean amplifies both sound and silence in ways that profoundly affect the psychology of early ocean travelers, where the constant rhythm of waves against hull and the whisper of wind through makeshift rigging create an acoustic backdrop against which human voices take on heightened significance as the primary link to sanity, cooperation, and cultural continuity during journeys that may last for weeks or months without sight of land. The development of communication systems capable of functioning effectively in this harsh acoustic environment becomes essential for the survival of expeditions that depend entirely on coordinated human effort for navigation, safety, and morale maintenance. The acoustic properties of water and wind create both opportunities and challenges for maritime communication, as sound travels differently over ocean surfaces depending on weather conditions, time of day, and the thermal characteristics of air and water masses. Experienced ocean travelers learn to recognize optimal conditions for long-distance vocal communication, understanding how temperature inversions and atmospheric pressure systems can either amplify or muffle human voices across substantial distances. These natural communication windows become crucial for maintaining contact between multiple vessels traveling together or for coordinating activities between crew members working in different parts of a single craft. The development of specialized maritime vocabularies reflects the unique communication needs of ocean travelers who must develop precise terminology for describing weather conditions, navigation information, and emergency situations using words that can be clearly understood even when shouted over wind and wave noise. These specialized vocabularies often incorporate elements that remain consistent across cultural and linguistic boundaries, creating proto-international communication systems that enable cooperation between groups that might otherwise be unable to understand each other. The survival value of clear communication in maritime environments provides strong evolutionary pressure for the development of standardized terminology and pronunciation that minimizes the risk of misunderstanding. The rhythmic nature of ocean travel creates natural opportunities for the development of maritime work songs and chanted instructions that coordinate group activities while providing psychological support during long periods of monotonous but essential labor. The repetitive motions required for paddling, bailing, and sail handling lend themselves to rhythmic vocal accompaniment that not only improves coordination but also provides mental stimulation and emotional release during the stress of ocean crossing. These work songs often evolve into complex musical traditions that preserve navigation information, historical accounts, and technical knowledge in forms that can be accurately transmitted across generations. The use of music and chanting for psychological support during ocean crossings reveals sophisticated understanding of human psychology and group dynamics. As early maritime cultures develop elaborate systems of call and response singing that maintains morale and group cohesion during the most difficult stages of long voyages. The content of these musical traditions often includes references to successful previous voyages, invocations of protective spirits or favorable weather, and detailed descriptions of destination islands that serve both as entertainment and as practical reminders of voyage objectives. The communal nature of maritime music creates shared experiences that strengthen social bonds and provide emotional anchors during periods of extreme stress and uncertainty. The development of non-vocal communication systems becomes essential for situations where voice communication is impossible due to weather conditions or the need for stealth during dangerous passages. Hand signals, flag systems using available materials, and percussion instruments create backup communication methods that can function when vocal communication fails. The standardization of these alternative communication systems within maritime communities creates redundant information transfer capabilities that significantly improve survival chances during emergency situations when clear communication can determine the difference between life and death. The preservation of navigation information through oral tradition requires sophisticated memory techniques that enable accurate transmission of complex technical knowledge without the benefit of written records. Master navigators develop elaborate mnemonic systems that encode detailed information about current patterns, seasonal weather variations, and landmark recognition into memorable songs, stories, and chanted instructions. These oral navigation guides often incorporate multiple layers of meaning, with surface narratives that entertain listeners while embedding precise technical information that can be extracted by those with appropriate training and experience. The social dynamics of communication during ocean crossings reveal fascinating insights into early human cooperation and leadership structures, as the stress of maritime travel creates situations where clear communication hierarchies become essential for group survival. The development of command structures and communication protocols reflects practical experience with the types of decisions that must be made quickly and decisively during ocean travel, when debate and consensus building can consume time that expeditions cannot afford to lose. Yet these hierarchical communication systems must also incorporate mechanisms for information sharing and consultation that take advantage of the specialized knowledge possessed by different expedition members. The psychological effects of isolation and sensory deprivation during long ocean voyages create unique communication challenges that require cultural adaptations and individual coping strategies. The development of internal monologue techniques and meditation practices helps individual travelers maintain mental stability during periods when external stimulation is minimal and social interaction is limited. These personal communication strategies often involve the creation of imaginary conversations with absent friends and family members, internal rehearsal of stories and songs that preserve cultural knowledge, and systematic review of technical information that might be needed during various stages of the voyage. The role of storytelling in maintaining group morale and cultural continuity during ocean crossings creates opportunities for the development of maritime literature traditions that preserve both practical information and cultural values in forms that provide entertainment during long periods of enforced inactivity. These storytelling traditions often incorporate themes of successful voyages, heroic navigators, and the discovery of new lands that provide psychological encouragement during difficult passages, while also preserving historical information about previous migrations and successful navigation techniques. The social nature of storytelling creates shared cultural experiences that strengthen group identity and provide common reference points for communication about abstract concepts and complex ideas. The integration of communication systems with navigation techniques creates hybrid information transfer methods that serve multiple functions simultaneously, as navigation chants preserve both technical information and communication protocols while work songs coordinate both physical labor and information sharing about changing conditions. These integrated systems demonstrate sophisticated understanding of human cognitive capacity and information processing limitations, designing communication methods that minimize mental workload while maximizing information transfer efficiency. The development of these multifunctional communication systems represents one of the most elegant solutions to the complex challenges of maintaining human cooperation and cultural continuity during extended periods of isolation and stress. 50,000 years ago, when the great land mass that modern geography calls Australia still stands connected to New Guinea by vast expanses of exposed coastal plain, the final water barrier that separates this continent from the populated islands of Southeast Asia presents early ocean travelers with their greatest challenge yet: a crossing of at least 90 kilometers across open water that has never been bridgeable even during the most extreme ice age conditions. This represents not just another island-hopping expedition but rather humanity's first true blue water voyage, requiring navigation techniques and vessel technology sophisticated enough to maintain course and structural integrity during multiple days at sea without sight of land. The preparation for this momentous crossing involves innovations in watercraft design that push bamboo and wood lashing technology to its absolute limits, creating vessels large enough to carry the substantial provisioning required for multi-day voyages, while maintaining the flexibility and buoyancy necessary for survival in the larger swells and more challenging weather conditions encountered in open ocean. These vessels represent the culmination of thousands of years of gradual technological development, incorporating design elements and construction techniques learned from countless shorter voyages into revolutionary craft capable of supporting human life during extended periods far from any possible refuge. The selection of expedition members for the Australia crossing requires careful consideration of not just individual skills and physical capabilities, but also group dynamics and psychological compatibility, as the stress of extended isolation in a small vessel far from land creates conditions that can destroy group cohesion and doom entire expeditions. The ideal crew combines master navigators with proven experience in long-distance ocean travel, skilled craftsmen capable of emergency vessel repair under challenging conditions, and individuals with demonstrated psychological resilience and ability to maintain morale during extended periods of uncertainty and hardship. The provisioning challenges for the Australia crossing force early ocean travelers to develop new techniques for food preservation and water storage that go far beyond the requirements of shorter island-hopping voyages, as the expedition must carry not just enough supplies to reach their destination but also sufficient reserves to establish initial settlements and survive until local food sources can be identified and exploited. The development of portable water storage systems becomes particularly crucial, as the human body's water requirements remain constant regardless of the availability of fresh water sources, and the failure of water storage systems during extended ocean voyages creates life-threatening emergencies within days. The navigation techniques required for the Australia crossing represent a quantum leap in sophistication from those adequate for shorter voyages between visible islands, as navigators must maintain accurate course headings for multiple days using only stellar navigation and dead reckoning techniques while accounting for the effects of unknown current systems and weather patterns that could carry vessels far off course without any visual reference points to indicate navigation errors. The development of these advanced navigation capabilities requires not just individual skill but also cultural knowledge systems capable of preserving and transmitting complex technical information across generations of maritime experience. The psychological preparation for the Australia crossing involves cultural and spiritual practices that help expedition members cope with the unique stresses of extended isolation and uncertainty, as the venture into truly unknown waters carries risks that go beyond physical danger to include the possibility of complete cultural isolation from all previous human contact. The development of ritual and ceremonial practices that maintain cultural identity and group cohesion during extended voyages becomes essential for preventing the psychological breakdown that could occur when familiar landmarks and cultural reference points disappear entirely beyond the horizon. The weather prediction capabilities required for successful Australia crossings demand sophisticated understanding of seasonal patterns and atmospheric phenomena that operate on much larger geographic scales than those relevant for shorter voyages, as expedition planners must identify weather windows that provide not just favorable conditions for departure, but also reasonable probability of continued favorable conditions throughout the entire multi-day crossing. The development of these extended weather prediction capabilities requires careful observation and systematic recording of atmospheric patterns over multiple seasonal cycles, creating bodies of meteorological knowledge that represent some of the earliest scientific approaches to understanding natural phenomena. The technological innovations required for extended ocean crossings include not just improvements in vessel construction and navigation techniques, but also developments in personal equipment and survival gear that enable individual expedition members to function effectively during extended periods of physical stress and environmental exposure. The creation of weather-resistant clothing, protective equipment for extended sun and salt spray exposure, and personal survival kits that can sustain individuals during emergency situations represents a complete system of maritime technology that addresses every aspect of human survival in the ocean environment. The moment of departure for the Australia crossing represents one of the most emotionally charged events in early human history, as expedition members make a conscious decision to venture beyond all previously established boundaries of human exploration into waters that may or may not lead to habitable land. The ceremonies and rituals that accompany these departures reflect the profound significance of the undertaking, with elaborate procedures for ensuring that essential cultural knowledge and spiritual practices are preserved even if the expedition does not return to share their discoveries with their communities of origin. The experience of true open ocean navigation during the Australia crossing creates new categories of human experience that had never before existed in the history of our species, as expedition members find themselves surrounded by endless expanses of water with no visual reference points to confirm their location or progress toward their destination. The psychological adaptation to this unprecedented situation requires mental flexibility and emotional resilience that pushes human cognitive and emotional capabilities into previously unexplored territory, creating new forms of consciousness and awareness that become part of the cultural heritage passed down to subsequent generations of ocean travelers. The successful completion of the Australia crossing represents not just a geographic achievement but also a fundamental transformation in human capabilities and self-conception, as our species proves capable of surviving and thriving in environments that seem utterly hostile to human life while developing technological and cultural systems sophisticated enough to support complex civilizations in complete isolation from previous centers of human development. The establishment of viable human populations on an entirely new continent demonstrates the remarkable adaptability and innovative capacity that enables our species to colonize virtually every habitable environment on Earth. The archaeological evidence of successful human arrival in Australia provides modern researchers with proof that early ocean travelers possessed maritime capabilities, far more sophisticated than previously believed possible, as the successful colonization of an isolated continent requires not just a single successful crossing, but also regular maritime contact sufficient to maintain viable breeding populations and enable the transfer of additional resources and personnel as needed for long-term survival. The genetic and archaeological record of early Australian populations reveals patterns of successful maritime travel that continue for thousands of years after the initial colonization, demonstrating that the Australia crossing represents not just a one-time achievement but rather the establishment of regular oceanic transportation systems. The first human communities to establish permanent settlements on islands far from their ancestral homelands face the profound challenge of creating new cultural identities that honor their maritime heritage while adapting to environments that demand innovative solutions to novel problems. These island pioneers become children of two worlds, the vast ocean that they have mastered as a highway to new possibilities, and the isolated lands that provide sanctuary but require complete rethinking of traditional survival strategies, social organization, and cultural practices. The psychological transformation that accompanies permanent island settlement involves fundamental changes in worldview and identity, as communities that once defined themselves in relation to continental landmasses and extensive social networks must develop new concepts of home, belonging, and cultural continuity. The ocean that once represented a barrier to be crossed becomes an integral part of daily life and cultural identity, while the limited land area of island environments creates entirely new relationships between human communities and natural resources that require careful management and conservation practices. The development of island-specific technologies reflects the unique challenges and opportunities presented by isolated environments, where traditional materials and techniques must be adapted to local resources while communities develop entirely new approaches to problems that never existed in continental settings. The creation of sophisticated water collection and storage systems becomes crucial for survival in environments where freshwater sources may be limited and seasonal, requiring engineering innovations that go far beyond the simple water storage techniques adequate for ocean voyages. The social dynamics of small island populations create unique cultural pressures that influence everything from marriage customs to resource distribution systems, as communities must balance the need for genetic diversity and social cooperation with the practical limitations imposed by small population sizes and limited resources. The development of sophisticated social institutions that can maintain cultural stability and prevent conflict within small, isolated groups requires wisdom and flexibility that draws upon the accumulated experience of generations of maritime cultures while adapting to completely new circumstances. The relationship between island communities and the surrounding ocean evolves into something far more complex than simple transportation, as the sea becomes a source of food, materials, spiritual inspiration, and cultural identity that pervades every aspect of daily life. The development of advanced marine resource management techniques enables island populations to maintain sustainable relationships with ocean ecosystems while supporting population levels that would be impossible without sophisticated understanding of marine biology and seasonal resource availability. The preservation of maritime knowledge within island communities becomes essential not just for maintaining contact with other populations, but also for ensuring that essential survival skills remain available for future generations who may need to undertake emergency evacuations or establish new settlements if local conditions become untenable. The creation of cultural institutions and educational practices that maintain high levels of maritime competency across entire populations represents a significant investment of community resources and attention in skills that may not be needed for immediate survival, but remain crucial for long-term security. The adaptation to island environments often requires the development of entirely new approaches to food production and resource management, as traditional hunting and gathering techniques must be modified to account for the limited biodiversity and carrying capacity of island ecosystems. The creation of sustainable agricultural systems on islands with limited soil and freshwater resources demands innovative solutions that combine traditional knowledge with careful observation of local conditions and systematic experimentation with new techniques and crops. The cultural evolution of island societies often involves the development of distinctive artistic and spiritual traditions that reflect the unique experiences of maritime peoples living in intimate relationship with both ocean and island environments. The creation of new mythologies, ceremonial practices, and artistic expressions provides psychological and social frameworks for understanding and adapting to island life, while maintaining connections to ancestral traditions and cultural values. These cultural innovations often incorporate sophisticated understanding of natural phenomena and seasonal cycles that provide both practical guidance and spiritual meaning for island communities. The challenges of maintaining genetic and cultural diversity within small island populations force communities to develop innovative social institutions and practices that prevent the isolation and inbreeding that could threaten long-term survival. The creation of marriage exchange systems, adoption practices, and cultural institutions that encourage contact and cooperation between different island populations requires sophisticated understanding of both population genetics and social psychology. These systems often involve regular maritime expeditions and ceremonial gatherings that maintain the navigation skills and vessel technologies essential for inter-island communication. The development of specialized island crafts and technologies often involves the creative adaptation of traditional techniques to local materials and conditions, creating distinctive regional variations in tool-making, construction methods, and artistic expression that reflect both shared maritime heritage and local innovation. The evolution of these specialized technologies demonstrates the remarkable adaptability and creativity of human communities faced with entirely new environmental challenges and opportunities. The relationship between island populations and seasonal weather patterns becomes intensely intimate and practical, as communities must develop sophisticated understanding of local climate variations, storm systems, and seasonal resource availability to survive and thrive in environments where weather conditions can dramatically affect food supplies, water availability, and transportation opportunities. The development of accurate local weather prediction capabilities becomes essential for planning agricultural activities, fishing expeditions, and inter-island travel. The establishment of trade relationships between different island populations creates networks of cultural and material exchange that span vast ocean distances, while maintaining the maritime skills and technologies necessary for regular long-distance travel. These trade networks often involve the exchange not just of material goods but also of cultural knowledge, marriage partners, and technological innovations that prevent the complete isolation of individual island communities while spreading successful adaptations and innovations across entire archipelagos. The long-term survival of island populations often depends on maintaining the flexibility and adaptability that characterized their maritime ancestors, as changing environmental conditions, resource depletion, and population growth may require communities to undertake new migrations or establish additional settlements. The preservation of maritime capabilities and cultural practices that support successful ocean voyaging becomes essential for maintaining long-term survival options and preventing the complete isolation that could doom island populations to extinction if local conditions become unsurvivable. In societies where written language does not exist, and survival depends upon the precise transmission of complex technical knowledge across generations, certain individuals emerge as living libraries of maritime wisdom, master navigators, whose minds contain detailed maps of ocean currents, seasonal weather patterns, stellar navigation techniques, and the accumulated experiences of countless previous voyages. These memory keepers become the guardians of humanity's most essential survival knowledge, their carefully trained minds preserving information that determines whether future expeditions will succeed or disappear forever into the vast emptiness of the open ocean. The training of a master navigator begins in early childhood and continues throughout an entire lifetime. involving the systematic memorization of enormous quantities of precise technical information that must be recalled accurately under the stress of emergency situations and challenging weather conditions. The educational techniques developed by maritime cultures for creating these human databases demonstrate sophisticated understanding of memory formation and retention, incorporating repetition, association, rhythm, and emotional content into complex learning systems that enable individuals to maintain perfect recall of essential information for decades. The navigation knowledge preserved by these master mariners encompasses far more than simple direction finding, including detailed understanding of seasonal variations in current patterns, the relationship between weather systems and ocean conditions, the behavioral patterns of marine life that indicate proximity to land, and the subtle environmental cues that enable position determination even when familiar landmarks are not visible. This knowledge system represents one of the most sophisticated technical accomplishments of pre-literate human societies, rivaling in complexity and precision the navigation techniques developed by technologically advanced civilizations. The social status of master navigators within maritime communities reflects the crucial importance of the knowledge they preserve, as these individuals often hold positions of tremendous respect and authority that extend far beyond their technical expertise to encompass roles as cultural leaders, spiritual advisors, and decision-makers in matters affecting the survival and prosperity of entire communities. The death of a master navigator without proper knowledge transfer represents a catastrophic loss that can effectively isolate communities from previously accessible regions and eliminate accumulated wisdom that may have taken generations to develop. The techniques used for knowledge transfer from master navigators to their successors involve elaborate apprenticeship systems that may extend over decades, with carefully structured learning progressions that begin with basic concepts and gradually advance to the most sophisticated and closely guarded secrets of advanced navigation. These educational relationships often take on spiritual dimensions that reflect the sacred nature of the knowledge being transmitted, with ceremonial initiations and ritual observances that emphasize the grave responsibilities associated with becoming a keeper of essential survival information. The preservation techniques used by memory keepers often involve the encoding of technical information into songs, stories, and ceremonial chants that provide multiple layers of meaning and create redundant storage systems for essential knowledge. These mnemonic devices demonstrate remarkable sophistication in their ability to preserve precise numerical information, complex spatial relationships, and detailed procedural instructions within narrative structures that are both memorable and emotionally engaging. The use of rhythm, rhyme, and repetition creates additional reinforcement mechanisms that help ensure accurate transmission even across multiple generations of retelling. The verification systems developed by maritime communities for ensuring the accuracy of preserved navigation knowledge involve elaborate testing procedures and cross-referencing techniques that compare information from multiple sources and validate knowledge through practical application. Master navigators must demonstrate their competency not just through recitation of memorized information, but also through successful navigation of actual voyages under varying conditions, proving that their theoretical knowledge can be effectively applied to real-world navigation challenges. The adaptation of preserved knowledge to changing conditions requires master navigators to develop sophisticated analytical capabilities that enable them to modify traditional techniques in response to environmental changes, seasonal variations, and novel navigation challenges. This requires not just perfect recall of traditional knowledge, but also deep understanding of the underlying principles that govern navigation phenomena, enabling experienced navigators to extrapolate from known conditions to predict behavior in unfamiliar situations. The cultural institutions that support memory keepers often involve elaborate social contracts and community obligations that ensure these essential individuals receive the resources and protection necessary for their specialized roles. The recognition that the survival of entire communities depends upon the knowledge preserved by master navigators creates strong incentives for providing these individuals with privileged status and ensuring their well-being, while also creating backup systems and multiple knowledge holders to prevent catastrophic knowledge loss. The psychological characteristics required for successful memory keeping involve not just exceptional recall capabilities, but also the mental discipline and emotional stability necessary to maintain accurate knowledge under the extreme stress conditions that often accompany emergency navigation situations. The development of these psychological traits requires both natural aptitude and extensive training in stress management techniques that enable clear thinking and accurate decision-making when survival depends upon immediate access to precisely recalled technical information. The evolution of memory-keeping techniques reflects the gradual accumulation of knowledge about human cognitive capabilities and learning processes, as maritime communities develop increasingly sophisticated methods for encoding, storing, and retrieving complex information. These techniques often incorporate insights about the relationship between emotional content and memory formation, the use of spatial visualization for information storage, and the importance of regular practice and rehearsal for maintaining long-term recall of detailed knowledge. The integration of memory keeping with spiritual and cultural practices creates holistic knowledge systems that preserve not just technical information but also the cultural context and wisdom traditions that give meaning to navigation knowledge. The recognition that successful navigation requires not just technical competency but also cultural understanding and spiritual preparation leads to educational systems that develop complete individuals capable of serving as both technical experts and cultural leaders within their communities. The legacy of traditional memory keepers extends far beyond their immediate contributions to navigation and maritime survival, as their techniques for knowledge preservation and transfer provide insights into human cognitive capabilities and educational methods that remain relevant for modern learning systems. The demonstration that human memory can reliably preserve and transmit complex technical knowledge across generations without written records reveals capabilities that complement and enhance modern information storage technologies while providing backup systems that remain functional even when technological resources are not available. Approximately 15,000 years ago, the great ice sheets that have locked away vast quantities of Earth's water for tens of thousands of years begin their slow but inexorable retreat toward the poles, setting in motion a process of sea level rise that will ultimately submerge the land bridges and exposed coastal plains that have served as highways for human expansion across the globe. This gradual transformation of global geography creates both opportunities and catastrophic challenges for maritime communities, whose entire way of life depends upon navigation routes and island chains that are slowly disappearing beneath the rising waters. The rate of sea level rise during the post-glacial period varies dramatically across different regions and time periods, with some areas experiencing relatively gradual changes that allow human communities time to adapt their settlement patterns and navigation techniques, while other regions face rapid inundation that forces entire populations to abandon ancestral homelands and seek refuge on higher ground or more distant islands. The archaeological record of this period reveals evidence of massive population movements and cultural disruptions as communities that have flourished for thousands of years in coastal environments find themselves forced to migrate or develop entirely new survival strategies. The psychological impact of witnessing the gradual disappearance of familiar landmarks and traditional navigation routes creates profound trauma for communities whose cultural identity and survival strategies are intimately connected to specific geographic features and established travel patterns. The knowledge systems that have enabled successful ocean navigation for generations become increasingly obsolete as the physical reality of the ocean environment changes faster than cultural adaptation can accommodate, forcing navigators to develop entirely new techniques while preserving whatever elements of traditional knowledge remain applicable to the transformed geography. The technological adaptations required for survival in the changing post-glacial environment often involve fundamental modifications to vessel design and construction techniques, as the longer distances between remaining islands and the deeper waters that replace shallow coastal areas demand watercraft with greater cargo capacity, improved structural integrity, and enhanced seaworthiness. The development of these advanced vessel technologies requires innovations in materials science, engineering principles, and construction techniques that represent significant advances over the simpler craft adequate for travel in the Ice Age environment. The social reorganization forced upon maritime communities by rising sea levels often involves the merger of previously distinct populations, as the disappearance of traditional territories forces groups to share increasingly limited land resources while maintaining the complex cooperation necessary for continued ocean travel and survival. These population consolidations create opportunities for cultural exchange and technological innovation while also generating potential conflicts over resources, territory, and cultural practices that must be resolved through negotiation and compromise. The preservation of cultural knowledge during the post-glacial transition requires adaptive strategies that enable communities to maintain essential survival information while modifying traditional practices to account for changed environmental conditions. The memory keepers and master navigators, who serve as repositories of accumulated wisdom, face the unprecedented challenge of determining which elements of traditional knowledge remain valid in the transformed environment while developing new techniques and information systems appropriate for the changed conditions. The development of new navigation techniques adapted to post-glacial geography often involves the integration of traditional knowledge systems with innovative approaches that take advantage of the different environmental conditions created by higher sea levels and altered coastlines. The deeper waters and longer distances between islands require more sophisticated dead reckoning techniques and improved methods for maintaining course accuracy during extended periods without visual landmarks, while the changed patterns of marine life and ocean currents demand entirely new approaches to environmental navigation. The resource management challenges created by rising sea levels force island communities to develop more intensive and sophisticated approaches to food production and material acquisition, as the reduction in available land area and the loss of traditional resource zones require more efficient utilization of remaining resources while maintaining sustainable harvesting practices. The development of advanced aquaculture techniques, intensive agriculture methods, and comprehensive resource recycling systems becomes essential for supporting viable populations on smaller and more isolated land areas. The establishment of new trade networks and cultural exchange systems becomes crucial for post-glacial maritime communities as the increased distances between populations and the loss of traditional meeting places require more sophisticated communication and transportation systems. The development of regular voyage schedules, standardized trade protocols, and reliable navigation routes enables communities to maintain essential contact and resource exchange despite the challenges imposed by the transformed geography. The environmental monitoring capabilities required for successful adaptation to post-glacial conditions demand sophisticated understanding of the relationships between climate patterns, sea level changes, and local environmental conditions. Communities must develop techniques for predicting and preparing for continued environmental changes while adapting their settlement patterns and resource management strategies to account for ongoing modifications to their physical environment. This requires not just reactive adaptation but also proactive planning based on careful observation and analysis of environmental trends. The cultural innovations that emerge during the post-glacial transition often involve the development of new mythologies, spiritual practices, and artistic traditions that help communities process the psychological and social challenges of adapting to a fundamentally transformed world. These cultural developments provide frameworks for understanding environmental change while preserving essential elements of traditional identity and values that maintain community cohesion during periods of rapid adaptation and social reorganization. The long-term consequences of post-glacial environmental change include the complete isolation of some human populations on remote islands, while creating new opportunities for cultural development and technological innovation among communities that successfully adapt to the changed conditions. The genetic and cultural divergence that results from this isolation creates distinct regional populations with specialized adaptations, while the continued cultural exchange among successfully adapted maritime communities spreads innovations and maintains connections across vast ocean distances. The legacy of post-glacial adaptation includes the development of advanced maritime technologies and cultural systems that enable human communities to thrive in ocean environments, using techniques and knowledge systems that represent thousands of years of accumulated experience and innovation. These adaptations create the foundation for the sophisticated maritime civilizations that will eventually develop advanced navigation techniques, complex social organizations, and technological capabilities that enable regular travel across vast ocean distances while supporting substantial populations on isolated islands and coastal regions. Deep within the spiral structure of human genetic material lies a molecular record of our species' most extraordinary journeys, written in sequences of nucleotides that preserve evidence of ancient ocean crossings, population bottlenecks, and genetic mixing events that occurred when small bands of maritime pioneers established new settlements on distant shores. Modern genetic analysis techniques reveal patterns of human migration that confirm and illuminate the archaeological evidence for early ocean travel while providing precise timing and demographic information about these prehistoric voyages that left no written records but permanently altered the genetic landscape of our species. The mitochondrial DNA inherited through maternal lineages carries particularly clear signals of ancient population movements and founder events, as the relatively rapid mutation rate of these genetic sequences creates molecular clocks that can accurately date major migration events, while the pattern of genetic diversity within different populations reveals information about the size and composition of founding groups. The analysis of mitochondrial lineages among Pacific Island populations provides compelling evidence for multiple waves of human migration that required sophisticated maritime technology and navigation skills to accomplish successfully. The Y chromosome sequences passed down through paternal lineages tell complementary stories of human migration patterns, often revealing different timing and routes for male and female ancestors that suggest complex patterns of cultural exchange, intermarriage, and population mixing that occurred as different groups of early ocean travelers encountered each other on distant islands and coastal regions. These genetic patterns provide evidence for the extensive trade networks and cultural connections that linked maritime communities across vast ocean distances while maintaining genetic diversity within small isolated populations. The comparison of genetic sequences among different Pacific Island populations reveals clear evidence of the stepping stone migration pattern that enabled human expansion across the vast Pacific Ocean, with each island population showing genetic relationships to both their ancestral source populations and their descendant communities. This genetic archaeology provides precise information about the sequence and timing of island colonization while revealing the demographic processes that enabled successful establishment of viable populations on isolated islands with limited resources. The genetic bottlenecks evident in island populations provide quantitative information about the minimum population sizes that were capable of successful long-term colonization, revealing that many island settlements were established by surprisingly small founding groups that somehow managed to maintain sufficient genetic diversity to avoid the inbreeding depression that typically dooms small isolated populations. These genetic patterns suggest that early maritime communities possessed sophisticated understanding of population genetics and social organization that enabled them to establish viable settlements despite severe demographic constraints. The presence of genetic markers associated with specific adaptive traits provides evidence for the environmental pressures that shaped human evolution in maritime environments, including genetic variants that enhance diving ability, improve tolerance for high-salt diets, and increase resistance to ultraviolet radiation from extended sun exposure. These adaptive genetic signatures provide additional confirmation that human populations have lived in intimate relationship with ocean environments for thousands of generations, developing specialized physiological capabilities that enhance survival in maritime conditions. The genetic mixing patterns revealed by modern DNA analysis provide evidence for extensive cultural contact and intermarriage between different groups of early ocean travelers, suggesting that the prehistoric Pacific was characterized not by isolated populations but rather by extensive networks of cultural and genetic exchange that linked communities across thousands of miles of ocean. These patterns of genetic flow contradict earlier theories about isolated island populations while supporting archaeological evidence for sophisticated trade networks and regular long-distance voyaging. The timing of genetic divergence events provides precise dates for major population splits and migration events that can be correlated with archaeological evidence and environmental changes to create comprehensive models of early human expansion across the Pacific. The genetic evidence consistently points to much earlier dates for initial island colonization than previously believed possible, requiring sophisticated maritime technology and navigation capabilities that existed tens of thousands of years before the development of agriculture and complex state societies. The analysis of ancient DNA, extracted from prehistoric human remains, provides direct evidence for the genetic characteristics of early maritime populations, while confirming the relationships between ancient and modern populations revealed by studies of contemporary genetic variation. These ancient genetic sequences provide snapshots of human genetic diversity at specific points in time while revealing evolutionary processes that shaped human adaptation to maritime environments over thousands of generations. The geographic distribution of specific genetic lineages provides evidence for the routes taken by early ocean travelers while revealing information about the environmental and cultural factors that influenced migration patterns and settlement choices. The concentration of certain genetic markers in specific regions suggests that early maritime populations developed specialized adaptations to particular types of ocean environments while maintaining genetic connections to ancestral populations through continued cultural contact and occasional return migration. The genetic evidence for repeated contact between island populations and continental source areas suggests that early ocean crossings were not one-way journeys, but rather part of ongoing networks of cultural and genetic exchange that maintained connections between island communities and their ancestral homelands. This pattern of continued contact provides evidence for regular maritime travel capabilities that enabled communities to maintain viable population sizes and cultural continuity despite the challenges of island isolation. The molecular analysis of genetic drift and founder effects in island populations provides quantitative measures of the demographic processes that shaped human genetic diversity in maritime environments, while revealing the minimum population sizes and migration frequencies necessary to maintain viable communities on isolated islands. These genetic parameters provide crucial information for understanding the social organization and resource management strategies that enabled successful long-term human occupation of remote islands with limited carrying capacity. The discovery of genetic adaptations specific to maritime environments provides evidence for the evolutionary pressures that shaped human physiology and behavior in ocean-dependent communities, while revealing the timescales required for significant evolutionary adaptation to specialized environmental conditions. These genetic signatures of maritime adaptation confirm that human relationship with ocean environments extends far back into our evolutionary history, while providing biological validation for archaeological evidence of sophisticated maritime cultures that thrived for thousands of generations before the development of written records. As the great ice sheets continue their relentless retreat and ocean levels rise to approach their modern configurations, the window of opportunity for easy maritime travel between distant continents begins to close forever, creating a sense of urgency among the remaining populations that still possess the knowledge and technology necessary for long-distance ocean voyaging. These final generations of Ice Age navigators face the challenge of completing humanity's expansion into the last remaining uninhabited regions, while preserving the accumulated wisdom of thousands of years of maritime experience for transmission to descendants who may never again enjoy the geographic advantages that made their ancestors' achievements possible. The rising seas gradually eliminate the stepping stone islands and exposed reefs that have served as waypoints and emergency refuges for countless previous expeditions, forcing the last generation of long-distance voyagers to attempt crossings that require unprecedented levels of self-sufficiency and navigational precision. The vessels constructed for these final expeditions must carry not just the standard provisions for extended ocean travel, but also the materials and tools necessary for establishing completely self-sufficient settlements in environments that may offer no immediate sources of familiar resources or construction materials. The psychological pressure on these final maritime pioneers becomes almost unbearable as they recognize that their voyages represent not just exploration, but also the last opportunity for human expansion into remaining uninhabited regions before the changed geography makes such expeditions impossible for future generations. The weight of this historical responsibility adds emotional stress to already dangerous undertakings, while creating additional motivation for expedition members to accept risks that more cautious individuals might consider unacceptable. The technological innovations required for the last crossings often represent the culmination of thousands of years of gradual improvement in maritime engineering, with vessel designs that incorporate every lesson learned from previous expeditions while pushing the boundaries of what is possible using traditional materials and construction techniques. These final generation craft often feature redundant structural systems, enlarged cargo capacities, and sophisticated provisioning arrangements that reflect the understanding that these expeditions will have no opportunity for resupply or emergency assistance once they disappear beyond the horizon. The selection criteria for expedition members becomes increasingly stringent as communities recognize that the individuals chosen for these final voyages carry with them not just their own survival, but also the responsibility for establishing the genetic and cultural foundation for entire new populations that may remain isolated for thousands of years. The genetic diversity, cultural knowledge, and technical skills represented by expedition members must be sufficient to support viable long-term populations while preserving essential elements of accumulated human wisdom for transmission to future generations. The provisioning challenges for the last crossings require innovations in food preservation, water storage, and equipment design that go far beyond anything needed for shorter voyages between closely spaced islands. The development of concentrated nutrition systems, long-term water purification techniques, and durable tool designs that can support extended use without replacement or repair represents the culmination of prehistoric materials, science, and engineering innovation. These technological achievements often remain unrecognized by modern archaeology, because they involve perishable materials and techniques that leave little trace in the archaeological record. The navigation requirements for the final long-distance crossings demand the highest levels of traditional maritime knowledge, while also requiring adaptation to changing environmental conditions created by rising sea levels and altered weather patterns. Master navigators must modify traditional techniques to account for longer distances, changed current patterns, and the absence of familiar landmarks, while maintaining the precision necessary for successful landfall after weeks or months of open ocean travel. The margin for error in these navigation calculations becomes vanishingly small as the distance between departure points and destinations increases beyond all previous experience. The cultural preparations for the last crossings involve elaborate ceremonies and rituals that serve both practical and spiritual functions, providing psychological support for expedition members while ensuring that essential cultural knowledge and practices are properly documented and preserved for transmission to future generations. These cultural preservation efforts often involve the creation of portable cultural artifacts, the memorization of essential cultural knowledge by multiple expedition members, and the establishment of procedures for maintaining cultural continuity even if founding populations remain isolated for extended periods. The weather prediction capabilities required for planning the final crossings must account for seasonal patterns and atmospheric phenomena that operate on much larger scales than those relevant for shorter voyages, as expedition planners attempt to identify weather windows that provide optimal conditions for departures that cannot be delayed or postponed if initial attempts fail. The development of these extended-range weather forecasting techniques requires synthesis of accumulated meteorological knowledge with careful observation of current conditions and systematic analysis of seasonal patterns that may extend over multiple years. The moment of departure for the last crossings represents one of the most emotionally charged events in human prehistory, as communities bid farewell to expedition members who may never return while recognizing that successful voyages will establish human presence in previously uninhabited regions that may remain isolated from other human contact for thousands of years. The ceremonies accompanying these departures often involve elaborate rituals for ensuring spiritual protection and favorable conditions while also serving as final opportunities for knowledge transfer and cultural preservation. The successful completion of the last crossings establishes human presence in the most remote and isolated environments on Earth, while demonstrating the remarkable capabilities developed by maritime cultures during thousands of years of gradual technological and cultural evolution. These achievements represent the culmination of human prehistoric maritime development, while also marking the end of an era when geographic expansion was possible using traditional technologies and navigation techniques. The populations established by these final voyages often develop unique cultural adaptations and technological innovations while preserving elements of ancient maritime wisdom that provide valuable insights into human capabilities and achievements during the prehistoric period. The archaeological evidence for the last crossings often appears in the form of the earliest human artifacts found in previously uninhabited regions, with dating techniques that provide precise information about the timing of initial human arrival, while artifact analysis reveals information about the technological capabilities and cultural practices of founding populations. These archaeological sites often preserve unique assemblages of tools, materials, and cultural artifacts that provide rare glimpses into the final stages of prehistoric maritime development while documenting the remarkable achievements of the last generation of Ice Age ocean travelers. The legacy of the last crossings includes not just the establishment of human populations in remote regions, but also the preservation of ancient maritime knowledge and cultural practices that might otherwise have been lost as rising sea levels eliminated the geographic conditions that made traditional navigation techniques possible. The cultural traditions maintained by these isolated populations often preserve elements of prehistoric maritime wisdom that provide valuable information about human technological and cultural achievements during periods when written records did not exist. But human capabilities reached extraordinary levels of sophistication and effectiveness. As we drift back from these distant shores of deep time, carried on currents of imagination and evidence back to our modern moment, we carry with us the profound recognition that the blood flowing through our veins once pulsed through the hearts of individuals brave enough to push crude vessels into unknown waters armed with nothing more than accumulated wisdom, unshakable determination, and the fundamental human conviction that somewhere beyond the horizon lay possibilities worth risking everything to discover. The ocean crossings that enabled our species to inhabit every corner of the habitable Earth represent more than remarkable feats of prehistoric engineering and navigation. They embody the essential human characteristic that continues to drive our species toward new frontiers. Whether those frontiers exist in the vast expanses of outer space, the microscopic realms of genetic engineering, or the infinite landscapes of digital possibility. The same restless curiosity that compelled our ancestors to lash together bamboo poles and venture into the trackless void continues to motivate modern explorers who push the boundaries of human knowledge and capability in pursuit of discoveries that previous generations could never have imagined. The technologies that enabled these ancient ocean crossings, the careful selection and preparation of materials, the sophisticated understanding of natural phenomena, the complex social systems that supported dangerous expeditions, demonstrate levels of innovation and problem-solving capability that challenge our assumptions about prehistoric human capabilities, while providing inspiration for modern approaches to seemingly impossible challenges. The recognition that our ancestors accomplished extraordinary feats using only natural materials and traditional knowledge systems suggests that human ingenuity and determination may be more powerful resources than the most advanced technologies, particularly when those human qualities are supported by deep understanding of natural systems and careful observation of environmental patterns. The social cooperation and cultural institutions that made ancient ocean voyaging possible provide valuable models for modern efforts to address challenges that require unprecedented levels of international cooperation and long-term planning. As the climate changes and environmental degradation that characterize our current era demand responses that span generations and transcend traditional boundaries of culture, nationality, and individual self-interest. The memory keepers and master navigators who preserved essential survival knowledge across generations of oral transmission demonstrate the importance of investing in education systems and cultural institutions that maintain essential human capabilities even when immediate practical applications may not be apparent. The psychological resilience and spiritual preparation that enabled ancient voyagers to venture into complete uncertainty while maintaining hope and determination provide insights into human mental and emotional capabilities that remain relevant for individuals and communities facing the uncertainties and challenges of modern life. The recognition that our ancestors successfully navigated both literal and metaphorical unknown territories using internal resources of courage, wisdom, and faith suggests that these same internal resources remain available to modern humans willing to cultivate and develop them through appropriate practice and preparation. Perhaps most importantly, the story of how the first humans crossed oceans without boats reminds us that the boundaries that seem to limit human possibility are often more flexible and permeable than they initially appear, and that the combination of human intelligence, determination, and cooperation can overcome obstacles that seem insurmountable when approached individually or with limited resources. The vast Pacific Ocean that once represented an impossible barrier to human expansion ultimately became a highway that connected rather than separated human communities, transforming from an obstacle into an opportunity through the application of human ingenuity and the willingness to venture into the unknown in pursuit of new possibilities. As you close your eyes and allow sleep to carry you toward your own distant shores of dreams and rest, remember that you are the descendant of individuals who quite literally reached for the stars reflected in ancient waters, who chose hope over fear, exploration over security, and possibility over limitation. The same currents that carried their vessels across impossible distances continue to flow through your life, offering opportunities for discovery and growth that may seem as impossible today as ocean crossing seemed to coastal dwellers of the distant past. Thank you for joining me on this journey through deep time and vast waters. If you've enjoyed exploring these ancient maritime highways, please subscribe to continue discovering the extraordinary stories hidden in our shared human past, and leave a comment sharing your thoughts about the courage and ingenuity of our remarkable ancestors. Until our next voyage into the mysteries of human achievement, may fair winds and following currents carry you safely toward whatever new horizons call to your restless spirit.